What if one sip of water changed a cowboy's life forever? Ethan ignored the warning and drank from the forbidden spring. But the whisper he heard was only the beginning. Trapped by a mystery older than the Wild West, he faced a choice that would change everything. Watch till the end, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join for more unforgettable stories. The sun burned over the endless plains of Montana as cowboy Ethan Carter pushed forward beneath the relentless heat. His canteen had been empty since morning, and every mile felt longer than the last. His horse, Ranger, moved slower with each step, lowering its head as if sensing something unusual ahead. Dust drifted across the trail and blurred the distant hills. Ethan scanned the land and noticed a narrow opening between tall canyon walls. Hoping to find shade or water, he guided Ranger inside. The air became strangely cooler. Then he saw it, a crystal-clear spring surrounded by weathered stone markers arranged in a silent circle. Ethan dismounted and stepped closer. The water looked untouched, almost glowing beneath the afternoon light. He remembered the old ranch hands laughing around a fire while warning him about this place. They had called it the Forbidden Spring. One old man had looked serious and said, "No matter how thirsty you are, don't drink from it." Ethan had dismissed the story as another frontier myth meant to scare newcomers. He crouched beside the water and touched it. Instantly, a chill ran through his hand. Still, thirst won. He cupped his hands and drank deeply. The water was colder than mountain ice. For a brief second, it felt refreshing. Then the canyon changed. Every sound disappeared. No wind, no horse breathing, no distant birds. Ethan slowly stood and looked around. The silence pressed against him until a faint voice drifted through the still air. Soft, clear, close enough to touch. "You belong to me." Ethan spun around and reached for his revolver in one quick motion. Nobody stood behind him. The canyon remained empty. Only the stones surrounded the spring like silent watchers. Ranger suddenly pulled back and let out a nervous snort. Ethan forced himself to laugh and blamed the heat for playing tricks on his mind. He left the canyon before sunset and made camp near a cluster of dry trees. Yet something felt wrong. Ranger refused to eat and kept staring into the darkness beyond the firelight. Ethan tried to rest, but strange sounds kept returning. Slow footsteps moved around the camp, not approaching, circling. He grabbed his rifle and searched the shadows, but found nothing. The fire flickered strangely, even though there was no wind. The night felt colder than it should have been. Hours passed. Ethan finally sat beside the fading fire and closed his eyes for a moment. Then he sensed someone standing nearby. He opened them instantly. Across the flame stood the outline of a woman. Her figure seemed pale and blurred like smoke, yet her eyes remained fixed on him. She wore old frontier clothing and did not move. Ethan stood slowly, unable to speak. The woman tilted her head slightly and whispered in the same soft voice from the canyon, "Now you cannot leave." Morning came, but Ethan Carter was no longer at his camp. He opened his eyes slowly and froze. The cold stone beneath him was familiar. He sat up and saw the same crystal-clear spring resting quietly in the center of the canyon. His campfire was gone. His blanket was gone. Only Ranger remained nearby, standing unnaturally still and staring into the water without blinking. Ethan's heart raced. He mounted his horse and rode out immediately, following the same canyon path he had taken the day before. Hours passed beneath the rising sun, but when he finally stopped, the spring stood before him again. Determined not to panic, Ethan tried another direction. He marked rocks, carved signs into trees, and even counted the turns through the canyon walls. Yet every trail ended at the same place. The forbidden spring waited silently, as if it had never moved. The air felt heavy. Ranger refused to step closer. Then Ethan noticed movement across the water. A woman stood there wearing faded frontier clothes from another time. Her face looked calm, but deeply tired. She wasn't threatening. She simply watched him with sad eyes and quietly said, "For years, I waited for someone to hear me." Ethan lowered his revolver. Something in her voice felt human, not dangerous. He asked who she was. The woman looked toward the circle of old stone markers surrounding the spring. Slowly, she explained that many years ago she had traveled west with settlers. One day, fearing rumors about the strange spring, the group abandoned her there after she became lost. She survived for days beside the water until she realized she could never leave. The spring trapped her between worlds. Every person who heard her voice ran away before understanding. She had waited through decades for someone to stay. Ethan looked around and noticed one stone marker lying broken several feet away from the circle. It seemed out of place. The woman pointed toward it but said nothing. Ethan approached carefully. The stone was heavier than expected, but he lifted it and carried it back. The moment he placed it into the empty space, the ground trembled softly. Wind rushed through the canyon. The water rippled for the first time. The woman closed her eyes and smiled gently. Her figure began fading into the morning light. Before disappearing completely, she whispered, "You gave me freedom. Now live yours." The canyon became quiet again. The cold feeling disappeared. Ranger finally moved forward and drank calmly from the spring. Ethan stood there for a long moment before turning away and riding back toward open country. Years passed, and he never returned to the canyon. But on certain nights, when the world became silent and the stars filled the sky, Ethan sometimes heard the faint sound of flowing water nearby. He would stop, listen for a moment, and remember the woman who had waited too long to be forgotten.